Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EDHRECast. I am your host for the week. My name is Matt Morgan, and as my usual co-host, I have Dana Roach here as well. Dana, what's going on?
I'm doing great this fine evening. So well, I don't even have a dad joke queued up. I'm just going to move right along.
I mean, it's a special occasion. I don't have a dad joke ready to go either, but the special occasion is it's pretty dang special because this week we have a very special guest, a friend of the show, friend in person and everywhere, basically. So, Teferi Magic, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone who wrongfully doesn't know who you are?
Hey gang, it is me, Teferi Magic on Twitter, or Teferi MTG on Instagram, or just Teferi. You can just call me that if you want. My muggle name, sorry for crossing the streams, is Arlando. I also answer to that from time to time.
I see what you did there, being Teferi, who is the Wizard of Time. Actually, are you a pretty good chef if you are the Wizard of Time?
You know, I do keep a good eye on what's going on the stove. So the timer usually doesn't get away from me. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to oregano on this.
Oh, boy.
That was a stretch. I'm sorry. I'm just going to move along. So the reason, everyone, that we have Arlando on the show is we're in the middle of preview season for Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. And this set is super exciting. Arlando reached out to us and said, hey, I've got an idea. Do you just want to talk about Lord of the Rings and be nerds? And we were like, of course, yes. So here we are. We're going to get real nerdy this week. So buckle in, everybody. But real quick, we do have some shout outs to do before we move on. So Dana, take us away there.
First, we want to thank Chase, also known as Manic Curves, for help editing the show. You can find them on Twitter at Manic Curves.
And if you would like to support the show, you can do so by liking and subscribing to this video on YouTube, subscribing to your local podcast app, or by going to patreon.com/EDHRECast, where we have patron tiers of all sorts of levels. You can join our Discord community for $2 a month. It's nothing. It's a great community. It's awesome. But also, there's a tier where you can get the weekly patron shout out. That's what Patrick Wozniak did. Went over to patreon.com/EDHRECast. And Patrick, it could be cool if you're Carolyn Wozniacki. You're so close, or Steve Wozniak. You have some very, very famous namesakes. But Patrick, we appreciate your support either way, and thank you so much.
Lord of the Rings. Should we jump right into it here and start talking about it?
Heck yeah, we should.
We may as well. I mean, that's the whole reason Arlando's here. So Teferi, good sir.
Yes.
You reached out to us, and you were very excited to match our excitement. How just wild is it to you that we're kind of crossing over Magic the Gathering with Lord of the Rings just to begin with? Because it's kind of groundbreaking.
It feels like a nexus of fate, if I may be so bold. I feel like the Lord of the Rings, since I was a wee young scamp, has been, just a seminal text, something that I loved since I was just a kid and read all the books. I was reading The Hobbit to my 5th grade class, and then graduated to the trilogy, and it blew my mind and set the tone for, in many ways, what I consider good storytelling to be. And it's to me, J.R. Tolkien is in the holy trinity of fantasy writers, my personal fantasy holy trinity.
Yeah, I was curious, so did somebody introduce you to that? Or was it just happenstance that you were in the library and saw The Hobbit and picked it up and it went from there?
That's a great question. My mom actually had it on her bookshelf.
Nice.
And she's like, you might like that. It might be something you're into. And I was like, okay. And hooked.
Yeah.
Hooked. So yeah, just amazing. I might have seen the animated film, which I dearly love. I think has so much going for it over the trilogy that shall not be named. But the original Hobbit film is just a sweet little thing. It's funky and it's weird. But it may have also just kickstarted that, because I was like, oh, there's a movie and that book is on my mom's bookshelf. So I like the movie. Maybe I should read the book. Very big reader. My mother was a librarian. So yeah. My
mom is an English teacher and theater teacher. So I get the big same right there. I was raised in the theater, a whole bunch of theater kids in college and high school. And so definitely had a lot of nerdy influences growing up too. And so that all rubbed off. I also remember watching the old cartoon movie, and I think I was too young to really understand what was going on, but I liked it. And now that I'm older, can appreciate it. It's so cool. And then, yeah, the Peter Jackson trilogy, I remember going to the theaters as it was coming out, and I went and saw each movie multiple times, and it was so great. And now just seeing that come over into Magic the Gathering, it's so exciting. I've been giddy since they announced it, and just when you reached out, I was also excited to have somebody to just nerd out with.
Yeah, I love it.
That old Rankin Bass Hobbit movie too is one of those like back in the 70s movies when, for whatever reason, like children's animation was so heavily influenced by people that were well into the pipeweed, I guess might be the way I would phrase that.
Yeah,
so
there's some dark moments.
Like genuinely weird, trippy stuff was just like, let's just show this to 6-year-olds. Why not? But I mean, it hooked me too. It was one of those things that I saw as a kid, and then a little bit, I think I was probably like early junior high or so when I finally read the book, and having had read other not very good fantasy, reading that Hobbit book and reading something written by a real writer who could turn a phrase and create a word and like create a world, that jump, like I remember right around the same time was the first time I saw Jaws, and I had these two realizations that like, oh, there's these things, and there's this thing that someone who's fantastically talented did, and those are very, very different. So like that the Hobbit was that for me for books, like Jaws was for movies.
Yeah, those are two good barometers.
Yeah, and I mean, now that we've kind of qualified our nerddom and fandom of Lord of the Rings, let's get into the actual cards, because like you said, we are mid-preview season, so we don't have all the cards out yet, but we wanted to record because my excitement is very high, and I know for you too, it's obviously very high. So of all the cards we've seen so far, like I said, we're a few days in. What is the most exciting to you? Just throw out, Arlando, what card immediately caught your eye as, oh my gosh, I need this one?
Immediately caught my eye. I can't remember. I want to say, and I've got Scryfall up here, but the Family of the Gathering previewed a card last night. It's the Doors of Durin, and it's costs 5, 3 colorless, a red and a green, and basically cheats out creatures, and is thematically on point, and looks very powerful in EDH especially.
So for those of you who don't know, Doors of Durin is a legendary artifact. It's 3, a red and a green. And it says, whenever you attack, you scry 2, then you may reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and attacking until your next turn. It gains trample if you control a dwarf, and hexproof if you control an elf. Yeah. So yeah, it's cheating things out. And the wildest part about this is you get to look at the top 2 cards and try to find something, and you're manipulating your top deck.
Right.
That just seems silly to me that you're able to do all of those things, not just reveal the top card or scrying. You get to do both of them.
And I love the flavor win. The Doors of Durin is so, memorable in the films and whatnot. But in terms of the marriage of dwarf and elf and the kinship that they shared, I think this is a wonderful representation of that in gameplay terms. And the flavor text is speak, friend, and enter, and that's what that is. It's just, I think it's just a gorgeous card that has got me excited.
And I'm very curious to see what the Elvish looks like, because you can, on the art of the card, you can kind of see the inscription on the actual door. I hope in foil that comes out really sharp, and hopefully the Watcher of the Lake doesn't come and get you. We haven't seen that card yet.
But the Watcher on the Water. Yeah. So
Dana, what about you? What's a card that immediately jumped out to you when you first saw it?
Probably the last March of the Ents. It's 6 green for sorcery. It can't be countered for 1. Draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Then put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So that's super powerful. The fact that it can't be countered is nuts. Flavor-wise, it's kind of a home run with the last March of the Ents as well. And I have an affinity for the Ents. That little storyline from the Lord of the Rings books, like it's such a tragic little story. Reading about these very peaceful, quiet, knowledgeable, wise creatures that are doomed. Like they're like, because the Entwives can't be found, their race is going to go extinct. This is their last attempt to make a difference in the world. It's like such a sorrowful and tragic story that has been one of the things from the books that has always stuck with me, is just the everything about the Ents and like seeing that represented on a really good card as well. That's the one that really popped out at me so far.
Yeah, it's a banger for sure. It's super green and super strong.
Yeah.
I mean, look, even if you take out the lore and everything behind the card, which, like you said, Dana, very powerful, the card itself is wildly powerful.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Why should you have to do a Solvala Stampede or a Rishkar's Expertise when you could just
do them all, right? Yeah.
Like, Rishkar's Expertise is already in pretty much every one of my green decks. This card is going in there with them too. Like, it's just everything that I like to do in green, this card is doing. And since you stole my card, because I also was thinking of Last March of the Ents.
Oh, nice.
I really want to mention Tom Bombadil. It's so hard to wrap up the character that is Tom Bombadil, but I think they did a really good job with it in a flavorful way. So Tom Bombadil it's all 5 colors, so a white, blue, black, red, and a green for a legendary god bard.
Legendary god bard, just a moment.
Just enjoy that.
Goals.
But Tom Bombadil is always singing in the books, always rescuing the hobbits because they need it. And so Tom also has other text. As long as there are 4 or more lore counters among sagas you control, Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. Great. And then whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. Put that card on the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And this only triggers once per turn. I love that they're turning Tom Bombadil into the storyteller of all these epic things, because Tom Bombadil's character was there from the beginning and will be there till the end. Kind of this eternal, godlike person, entity. I don't know what you could really call Tom Bombadil. I mean, Tolkien scholars argue about what you could describe Tom Bombadil as. Mm-hmm. And so just to see that played out on a card, every single card, I'm always just blown away with how they're making the flavor and the lore from Lord of the Rings translate into Magic cards, and it fits so stinking well.
Yeah, they did a really good job. I semi-mourn Tom Bombadil's excision from the films.
Sure.
But I also understood it, because it's like its own little thing over there.
It's this whole weird aside for like 70 pages or something.
Which is delightful. I mean, there is set up there. That's where they get the daggers of Westerness and all that to, do what they have to do later. But yeah, I'm glad to see Tom get some shine here. The rhetoric around what Tom is and who he is and why Tolkien wrote him. I could also walk down that path, but I think, to be succinct, Wizards did a great job. And this is a cool direction that they took him in.
Yeah, you put it a really, really good way to be succinct, because we could probably have a whole podcast episode debating Tom Bombadil. But yes, for the sake of time, there are so many more cards that we want to talk about. So what else peeks out of your mind? What is kind of a flavor win for either of you two, or a good legendary?
This isn't a legendary, but it's certainly not, anything that we kind of haven't seen before. But I posted this on Twitter, and this card really just struck me. It was a Smite the Deathless, and it is literally the moment, spoiler alert, that Éowyn stabs the Witch King in the face, and his essence is scattered forever through the doors of eternity, and with a little help from her buddy Mary in the ankle. And this is that moment captured in a card, literally like all the things. It is red, it's an action, it is cheap to do, it is done by these two people as depicted in this fantastic art. I'll read what Smite the Deathless does. It is 1 and a red. It is an instant. Smite the Deathless deals 3 damage to target creature. The creature loses indestructible until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. We've seen variations of this before, but never so cheap and never so fast. And that is telling from this character and this moment. And moreover, that glorious flavor text, "No living man am I," because the Witch King says that he cannot be harmed by any man. And Éowyn lets him know.
Yeah, it's a fantastic moment. And like you said, they're kind of doing unprecedented things. So like this is so much better than a regular lightning strike. And so it's just, I think it lends credibility to how heavy the moment is in the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting rid of indestructible, exiling the creature, the Witch King. You have to discard a card, I think, right, in order to grant indestructible. Mm-hmm. Is that what it? So it's just ensuring that Smite the Deathless is like, no, you are not getting away with this. You have a 3 toughness, you're going to die.
Witch King of Angmar, yes, you can discard a card, give it indestructible till end of turn, and tap it. And also, whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, each opponent sacrifices a creature that dealt damage to you this turn, and then the ring tempts you. So that brings out the next point. We haven't really talked about this.
Yeah.
But what do you think of the ring tempts you mechanic? Because I've seen a lot of divided takes on it. So what do both of you think about that?
Dana?
So we probably should actually read what it does here before we get any further into it.
Sure.
So as a ring tempts you, you get an emblem named the ring, if you don't already have one. And then your emblem gains the next ability, and you choose a creature you control to become your ring bearer. So the abilities we have here are, your ring bearer becomes legendary and can't be blocked by a creature with greater power. And then whenever your ring bearer attacks, draw a card and discard a card. Whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at the end of combat.
Oh my gosh.
And then whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life.
Well, so 5 life. Yeah.
So you have this progressively, like, as the more the ring tempts the ring bearer, kind of the stronger their abilities get, and probably more harmful to your opponents.
Well, and it should be noted too, you gain all those abilities. You don't lose them as you keep gaining them. So
Correct.
You're just adding abilities and abilities and abilities. So this mechanic is pretty powerful. But what do you think about this being all upside? Because I have some thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what both of you think about the mechanic overall.
So mechanically, I get why, like, that doesn't maybe necessarily make sense in terms of the books, but I also understand why, just to like force it into the existing confines of the game and make people want to attempt to. I understand the logic between not having a downside to just make it be a thing people want to try to get and work with as much as possible in terms of gameplay. Like, sometimes you have to occasionally make sacrifices for the rule of cool, and this might be one that I think kind of falls into that, where, like, yeah, it might be more logical if there were more downsides, but I get why they had to make that, maybe not include those so the card would, or the mechanic would just get played a lot more in the environment.
I think that's a very good explanation, Dana. I cannot argue with that. I do, however, wish for some downside. I mean, the ring is known for being problematic, period. And so I think that, there is a miss gameplay-wise and, lore-wise in terms of depicting that or granting that. And I know they did iteration upon iteration, and adding a whole new mechanic to the game, it's just adds so much complexity, and that's going to be narrow in this set. So I get it, right? But I feel like they could have, Dave Reel has his conditions, right? And I guess that's something on Arena. Mm-hmm. But, something that you could just see the growing cost of, cumulative upkeep is a thing, and no one wants to deal with that anymore. But also there's precedent, and this is something on a bit of a tangent, but I was like, why didn't you guys bring back Shadow again? Because it's literally Shadow.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
the Morgul blades from the Shadow.
And, only the people in Shadow and the Lord of the Rings can affect the people in Shadow, which is the mechanic that you actually did decades ago. And I'm sure, that also exists, and that conversation was probably had, but it really seems like that's what you should do. And there is a drawback to Shadow because you can't block.
Sure.
And so again, that kind of drawback to the ease of, getting through the way a Shadow might, it seems appealing to me in this kind of set. And the ring, I think, could have benefited from something like that.
I like that. And I think it's hard to kind of rationalize that. And Joey, I'm sure, and Joey's big on the names and descriptors of mechanics.
Yeah, Joey left a note. It says, I don't know Lord of the Rings as well as you guys do, but I wondered if instead of calling the mechanic the ring tempts you, they could have called it the ring's power grows or something. If they didn't want this mechanic to have a downside, it might have helped to use a different name that doesn't imply there should be a downside. So actually, that's a really good point. The name does imply that there's a negative to it, and very much there isn't. So yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah, the tempting kind of hints that there's a downside. And I really like Joey's distinction of the ring's power grows, the ring's influence grows, I think would be another one too. But I struggle also with how good Wizards of the Coast has been designing cards over the past couple years to think that they couldn't find a way to incorporate some sort of minuscule downside, because they've done so well flavor-wise with the rest of the set that the marquee mechanic that makes this Lord of the Rings being a miss kind of it stings a little bit. I think even just like if you draw 2 cards and lose one to show the mental decay that the ring has, or draw a card, lose a life, those types of things. Those are already mechanics they have in so many. I struggle to think they couldn't have found a creative way that has a little bit of a downside, just to show that ask Frodo if it was all sunshine and rainbows being the ring bearer. It definitely wasn't. And so flavor-wise, this is one of the rare misses in the set so far. For me, it's all upside having the ring tempt you, and that it just doesn't set right with me.
Yeah, it's a big one, and I played Middle-earth, the collectible card game.
Ooh.
That's the game that I played instead of Magic the Gathering when it came out, because I knew that once I got into Magic, my life would be over. And here I am today. That's another story for another time.
But your life isn't over, though.
No, but I mean, as I knew it, I suppose, let's say.
Fair.
Not that I would expire, but in that the life I led before would be irrevocably changed. And that has happened. Mm-hmm. And so thank you, Magic. So that's all to say, the pedigree of like card game and the mechanics. And I'm not here to really directly compare a game that no longer is functional to Magic. But they did a lot, perhaps too much, in terms of the costs of winning the game and what the rings could do and the ring could do, and the upside and the downside. It's fascinating mechanics, maybe not functional, but certainly fascinating.
I think purely from a gameplay perspective, one thing I do like about it is their last couple attempts at kind of Monarch-esque mini games, I think, have had the problem of being difficult for the third party in the game to track, whether it was like day or night, or the initiative even, where like you have this little small card that someone's holding upside down in 4-point font with like 3 different rooms below 3 rooms, and like you have to, look at borrow that card from them every single time if you want to check and see like where they're at or what the next step is. This just having 4 clear levels makes it visually, I think, much easier for you as someone playing against it to like see where they are on that and what the next level is. I like that. Visually, it's something that I can simply look at across the field, and much more easily than keeping track of day or night, or much more easily than the initiative, I can grok what's going on. And I do appreciate that. I think the simplicity of it, I think, is something I really like, and is going to make me want to play it more than some of their other attempts at like these kind of mini games.
Yeah.
That's really good points all around. And so I guess this kind of brings us to the next question. What do you think of the One Ring? Not the physical ring, but the card, the One Ring. So for everyone at home that doesn't know, the One Ring is 4 mana for a legendary artifact that is indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. And then you can tap it to put a burden counter on the One Ring. And then you draw a card for each burden counter on it. There's a lot of text, but do you think this lives up to the flavor that is the One Ring in Lord of the Rings?
I would say it does. And I think one of the reasons it kind of does is the way some of the wording is done in the text, it makes it difficult for you to interfere with it in a way that's beneficial to you, because you tap it, you put a burden counter on it and tap it, and then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. Yes, you can proliferate that up, I suppose, but like it's going to do more damage to you the more counters are on it. And when you remove counters on it, then you're going to draw less cards. Like you have to make that decision. When it comes to interfering with like the mechanics of the card, the more you interfere, the more it's going to hurt you, or the less it's going to hurt you, and the less cards you're going to draw. So like I do like the fact that there's not really ways to gamify it in a way that's only beneficial, and that feels kind of accurate to the ring. The ring does what the ring does, and it's not, you as a player aren't going to necessarily be able to do something to it that's going to make it unnecessarily helpful to you. It's always going to ding you, and it's going to help you less if you try to like remove counters or something.
Yeah. So Arlando, what do you think?
I have so many thoughts about the One Ring. I think Dana made some really great points. I think the idea is generally here. And I think given our previous discussion about the ring, the other card that we just discussed, this actually has drawbacks, right? This has elements and it is localized to this card, which is fine. I wish there was something about the temptation integrating with this more, since that's such a prevalent mechanic.
Yeah.
It'd be great if it more centralized and amplified in this way here with this card. I also would have liked to see you win the game or lose the game mechanic here. It's something difficult. No one likes those, but it could be challenging. For example, if you have Mount Doom in play and you sacrifice it in the One Ring on the same turn for X amount of cost, imagine like a meld mechanic with something like Urza or Planeswalker or whatever. You require these two cards in order to do this thing. And if your opponent does it, they get the opposite effect. Somebody wins, somebody loses if they are able to do it, because that's what happens in the books, right? Sauron doesn't get the ring is destroyed in Mount Doom, boom. However, had he gotten the ring, he would have won. So again, for me, that's just like me kind of casting my net. That would have been nice. But that said, I think this is fine. It doesn't wow me in the way that the most powerful and influential artifact in the history of fantasy fiction should.
Sure.
And I feel like it should, one of the most famous lines about the Lord of the Ring, and this is because I'm a nerd, I'm gonna own it, is that, its power grows in accordance to its bearer, or something to that effect. So depending if you have, Frodo or Sauron or another character wielding it, I would have loved to see some kind of, if possible, scalable effect that would have amplified as equipment to equip this thing and then really do the thing. Because that's what happens in the books. It's very easy. You put on the thing and it happens.
I like the idea that you threw out there of having meld. So the One Ring can meld into any different number of cards depending on what you meld it with. And I'm sure with a paper card game, logistically, that gets pretty hard to manage. So I understand why they didn't, but I love that idea. And I would have loved to see some sort of meld mechanic, or just some way of combining some of the characters that you have going on.
Yeah.
They kind of express that a little bit with Sam and Frodo with the pre-constructed decks, where Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, has partnered with Sam, Loyal Attendant. So they're able to combine their power together. I really love that. I love that they showed kind of the bond that especially Sam and Frodo had. And so being able to show that between the One Ring and Mount Doom, for example, or anything like that, I think that would have been such a cool way to kind of express how unique it is. And I understand that there aren't any double face cards in the set, and they probably wouldn't have done it just for one.
Right.
So I understand, but I do agree there was a lot of really cool ideas that you could have done. But as far as what we did get, I do like the design. I do like that it kind of does what the ring tempts you mechanic didn't do, and it offers a downside, but the downside becomes an upside when you're using it. And so how powerful do you let it become, those types of things? So I agree. Is it the most powerful artifact in all of fantasy? Probably not, but it's a good attempt, and I do think a lot of players are really going to put this in several decks, Dana especially.
Yes, but paying life to draw cards is absolutely my jam.
Right up your alley, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So no, I can't disagree with any of those complaints about it. But I also I'm a little bit, maybe I'm overly generous, but I feel like a lot of these things that might not have entirely hit the way in a perfect world I'd like to have them hit. I'm just so thrilled to see a lot of this stuff that I can't get too upset because it's Lord of the Rings on Magic cards.
I am far from upset. Yeah.
And the thing I want to note about that too is how natural this all feels, which number one shows just how much of our modern concept of fantasy is just directly from people, written by people who very much read Lord of the Rings when they were 12.
Absolutely.
And have been unable to shake some of those concepts, probably for the better in a lot of cases. But just seeing all these cards, Magic is
indebted.
A game created by folks who love The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And this all feels akin to the world we're already used to.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I work a full-time job and have family, plus friends I want to spend time with and hobbies I enjoy. Beyond all of that, I also work as a content creator. Finding a way to balance all of those things while also spending time with myself is difficult. It's so easy to get caught up in doing the day-to-day things you need to do that it can be a challenge to take time to think about what you need to do for yourself. Therapy can give you the tools to find balance in your life so you can do the things that need to get done without leaving yourself behind. Therapy has been helpful for me to set boundaries and prioritize the most important things in my life, and I've learned to take care of myself and my own mental well-being, and that's made it easier to be present for all of the things in life I want to experience. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be flexible around your schedule and to be as convenient as possible. That's important in this world where time is one of our most precious commodities. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/EDH today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/EDH.
So what else just is exciting to you? And I know it's hard to contain all of this in one episode, but I think we just really, it's such a rare opportunity for us just to gush about just how cool the set is. And like I said, we're only halfway through preview season. Right. There is so much more that we're going to see. We may miss a few of everyone's favorite cards, but if we do miss it, let us know in the comments what your cards are that we didn't get to talk about. But there's so much more cool stuff. So how about this question then? As far as folk that are in the Fellowship of the Ring, which card do you think gets you the most excited to build a deck around? Because they have several iterations of all of the Fellowship, whether it's Merry and Pippin or Gandalf, Gimli, all of them. Is there anything that stands out to you as far as the Fellowship?
For me personally, the mono white Gandalf is probably the one that I like as a card and like already like, oh, this is going to be so good in my deck. And it also feels like Gandalf. The 3 mana, 2 white for an Avatar Wizard. It's a 4/5 with Flash. You may cast legendary spells and artifact spells as though they had Flash. And that's not necessarily anything that feels like it's maybe from the book, but it still feels right, like a Gandalf card for some reason. Yeah. Even though like I'm not, he's not summoning legendary artifacts from nowhere necessarily. Mm-hmm. It just feels right. And I like that, like, even if they didn't necessarily grab something directly from the books, the vibe is there for me. And he also has ability, if a legendary permanent or artifact enters or leaves the battlefield, it causes a triggered ability to trigger it does an additional time. So again, you could say that's the flavor of Gandalf, doing things for the party or boosting their abilities or something, I guess. But it just feels correct to me. And a lot of these do. Like even if they aren't a perfect mirror of what you would see in the stories, just the flavor on them feels appropriate and feels comfortable.
I buy that, Dana. Yeah, I think Gandalf the White is extraordinary. There's another white Gandalf too, right? Like the White Rider. Am I wrong?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
But this guy, it feels like Gandalf. I agree. I think it's a very strong card in white, and it just feels right, which is really lovely. I think the Flash, and that's very Gandalf. The White Rider appeared. He just showed up, right? And even before he became the White, he always just, hey, Gandalf, you're here now. And so that nick of time, pun intended, was very, very on brand for this character.
One thing that I really appreciate too is just how they gave different iterations of all of the main characters on the card. So you get several versions of Frodo and Gandalf, and really showing just the different moments in time where they came through and made an impact on the overarching story. And I like Gandalf, Friend of the Shire. My only miss to me is some version of Gandalf, especially early in the books. He's very much a Simic mage. He loves hanging out with the halflings. He's in the Shire all the time. And even Saruman says, you've been spending too much time with halflings. His personality is very much a Simic mage. And it feels like a miss to me. Yes, we do get Radagast, who kind of fills that slot, but I really would have liked, and maybe we still do get to see one. I think Gandalf the Grey probably should have been Simic colors, which I understand trying to fill color pie slots. So But it is very Izzet in what it's doing. So whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you choose one that hasn't been chosen. You can tap or untap a target permanent. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. Copy target instant or sorcery spell you control, and you may choose new targets for the copy, or put Gandalf on the top of its owner's library for 3 in Izzet colors. So it does do a lot of Izzet things, but none of them really scream Gandalf to me. But
I feel a little differently.
Really? Okay.
I think Gandalf bore Narya, which was the Ring of Fire.
Yep.
And so I think they're kind of, and he's blue because he's a wizard.
Because he's a wizard, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of why they went in the direction. I probably would have added white just because that's kind of also his lane. So I made him Jeskai. It would have been super juicy. So anyway, for those reasons of being a wizard and spell casting and Bernie, I kind of buy it. That's just me.
Yeah, he did have the Ring of Fire, which I get. He also didn't use it a ton throughout. Well, yes, he uses it more in the books, but a lot of folks who are going to come in from the movies, you don't really see a whole lot of that. You don't even really know that he has it.
No, you don't know. Yeah, you really don't know in the films.
But I am glad that, especially with you cannot pass instead of you shall not pass, that's kind of one way that people tattle on themselves as not really having read the books. So
yeah. I mean, it's so ubiquitous, so it's very easy to make that mistake, I think. As far as cards I'm most excited about, I think I'm going to go with Aragorn the Uniter. This card is a kitchen sinker. It's, in the vein of a Kenrith, only you getting it for free. So it doesn't have black in it, but we'll talk about that later. We've got this Aragorn the Uniter is red, green, white, and blue for casting cost. Legendary creature, human noble, mythic rare. When you cast a white spell, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. Whenever you cast a blue spell, scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, Aragorn the Uniter deals 3 to target opponent, 3 damage to target opponent. Whenever you cast a green spell, target creature gets 4+4/+4 until the end of turn. You start casting, any dual color spells, like this thing just gets goofy, it seems like a super fun commander. So pretty excited about that guy.
Yeah, I think it'll have a lot of overlap with what people do with Ramos Dragon Engine decks, where it rewards you for playing spells with more colors. So you're going to see a lot of charms in this deck, especially now that we have 3 color charms that all are getting pretty useful in most situations. I think the deck is going to be very, very powerful because you cast 1 spell and you might get 3 of those abilities all at once. That's
crazy.
That's a lot of value.
That's a lot of value.
It's a lot of value, and again, it's one of those cards. Like, it just feels like it is from the books. It feels like it's a card lifted from what I kind of had imagined that phase of Aragorn in the book would be like. The vibe is there. It just works right.
Yeah, if I had to be a critiquer, because I will be, I guess.
Sure.
Because I can't help it.
Feel free.
This is me being super specific and nerdy, and I get why Wizards didn't do it. But having black going through the paths of the dead feels like a major moment for Aragorn, and that is a way that you could justify him having that. Not that he needs it; like he's got enough.
Sure.
Seriously,
he does
for it. But in terms of like, well, he totally brought that dead army back, and that's very black. That's the only thought I had. Just where is the black? Maybe.
Well, it's also like one of the few moments that he really acts selfishly, like he establishes himself and speaks up for himself and says, no, I am the king. I will be. And it's kind of him accepting that part of him too, which I know he kind of tried to stay in the background for so much of his life, but then he's finally owning it, I guess. But the card itself, I like a lot. It's very, very powerful. And it's just these minor. It sounds like we're dogging on these cards. These are so minor nitpicks compared to just all the great things that they're doing in the rest of that. I also really like Aragorn and Arwen Wed. I know I'm a Selesnya player at heart, but just seeing that and just how they play out, you get to, so it's 4 in Selesnya for a 3/6 legendary human elf noble. Has vigilance, and whenever Aragorn and Arwen Wed enter the battlefield or attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control, and then you gain 1 life for each other creature you control. If you're going wide, this also is going to do a lot of really cool things. You just amass your army, and I like how it's showing that leadership of King Aragorn, just ruling and just benefiting from all the people around him, which is what he did throughout so much of the Lord of the Rings books.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a big Selesnya player, but this is Selesnya City for sure.
So, I mean, we've talked about a couple of Aragorn cards here. I guess, would this be a time to talk about kind of the elephant in the room regarding the Aragorn art that seems to...
the elephant in the room, the mumak in the room for my nerds.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, the elephant in the room. Exactly.
So, yeah. I mean, I'll take point on this one. I think that, top line argument. There's a lot of back and forth and about this. And what bothers me the most is that why are y'all so pressed about this? Like, honestly, it's just a fantasy character from a practically sacred text. Like, I will grant you that. And a company chose to make a version of him in 2023. The novels didn't change. There will be other depictions that aren't on a card game, and it'll be fine. And so all the rancor and the energy expended, a lot of the hateful energy as well. It's like, but aren't there really, frankly, better ways to expend your hate? Like, honestly, like, you all have all this time for this. We are at war. There's a war in the world. Like, what? I'm very confused why this has got your goat. And I'll tell you why, though. This is the other piece. And no one has really articulated this. And there are, as far as I've seen, there are other characters in this game that have been given new looks and new appearance and new traits. But Aragorn is Jesus. Aragorn is the perfect man. And you had the audacity to come in here and make the perfect man black? Wow. So I think that is really why this character in particular, had it been Boromir, people are like, oh, there's a black Boromir. Well, but he died, so it's fine. And so, like, real talk, right? So, like, I think that's in particular why people are more incensed. They would be mad, period. But more incensed. This is the other piece. I wouldn't have made the choice. I don't necessarily disagree with the choice. It doesn't upset me. I'm a black man. I don't think it necessarily would upset me. But at the same time, I might not have made that choice. If someone else makes another choice on their own volition to give another character a different appearance, it's fine. Finally, someone came up to me when this card came out, and I just retweeted it. I don't think I said anything very profound or something, not the extent that I have here, which, of course, some of my words might be taken out of context. I'm looking forward to that. Someone said, well, what would happen if they made Teferi white? And I was like, that's fine. So if we're in the business of changing and race swapping magic characters, I guess we have to do that for all of them. So that means we're going to have a 95% black cast in magic. And if Teferi has to be sacrificed for the greater good, yeah, I'll say, I'll fight the Balrog on that.
You'll be the bigger person.
So it's just like, again, the fallacies of these arguments, right? Like all this petty back and it's just like, you guys, like, it ain't that serious. Really. It is serious because the imagination is what we hold dear. It's what we believe in. It's what grows us up from children and why we get excited about and talking about this at this late stage in the game. So I get why people on all sides are excited and passionate. I just think we need to move with respect and genuine respect. There's the fake arguments and that people like to do and spin things, but there's so little actual real dissection about what's happening and why. And at the end of the day, still respecting the person across the table from you.
Yeah. And the thing that always, every time I see these arguments that you're talking about, the folks are saying, well, here's what Aragorn should have looked like, but then they show a picture with Aragorn with a beard. But Aragorn, if you're going to be a literary purist, actually do it. Aragorn couldn't grow a beard because he had elvish ancestry. The people of Numenor, where Aragorn's ancestors are from, couldn't grow facial hair. They couldn't grow beards, and so. But also you look at Galadriel, Galadriel Elven Queen, which is a card I'm very excited for. I think Galadriel is one of the most powerful characters in all of Middle-earth. Yeah, absolutely. And the art on the card is not paper white like Cate Blanchett does in the movies. So I do agree there's a little bit of, it feels manufactured, but also just that has no impact on the character of Aragorn.
It changes nothing. And that's like they did that, guys. When you make your card game, you'll be allowed to depict them however you want. I won't come fight you. Yeah. Normal wizards.
Does Aragorn look super cool in the card? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For me, that's you've hit the mark I care about. Aragorn looks awesome on the card. That's for me the most important thing. And the fact that anyone can get spun up about anything else beyond that, is baffling. The art is fantastic and all the depictions we've seen so far. That should be the only thing you realistically care about. If you weren't getting wound up by the fact that James Bond was played by a Scotsman and someone who was Irish over the course of the probably the most iconic James Bond we've ever seen, was played by a Scotsman. If that didn't get you wound up, why is this getting you wound up? It just shouldn't. As long as James Bond is cool, that should be all that matters. As long as Aragorn looks cool, that should be all that matters.
Well, again, tradition, getting specific with this argument, since we have the space for it, he's still white.
I guess.
We haven't seen a black James Bond yet, and that's what we're coming up against. Again, just really having the real, honest conversation about it in a way that is respectful. That people have a lot of preconceptions on all sides about why and what makes a person a person. Mm-hmm. What makes a character a character.
But they tend to be very much grounded in our own reality and our conception of those things.
Yes, correct.
Which is such a bizarre thing to then apply to this fantasy setting with elves and dwarves and right. So like we're implying our concept of people with this skin color only come from a certain place, people from this, and like first of all, why are you applying those particular sets of rules to a fantasy setting? And maybe that's what you need to examine before you get anything else. Is like, why am I thinking in those concepts with this fantasy world?
And, that's energy expended that people feel comfortable or very passionate about, racism and the idea of what a character looks like. And again, a lot of it's attached with love, real love for the property. And they believe in the sacrosanct nature of what they perceive as Tolkien's idea. I get that. I kind of have that too. But we don't need to go to that extreme.
I mean, if we're going to open up the door for other folks to play James Bond specifically, I would love Pedro Pascal, or I'm on the Idris Elba train. I think they both are just dashingly handsome and charismatic. I would love that. But also in Lord of the Rings, I guess to repeat what you were saying, just it's weird to me, just the energy that people pour into this one detail that ultimately just doesn't matter. That's the battle that folks are picking. And I guess to me, it's worth pointing out for sure, because there's a lot of progress that we can still be making as a community. But I do want to focus our attention, because we do appreciate your perspective. Absolutely. Sure. It's something that obviously we can't offer. But as back to the cards themselves, is there anything else that maybe missed the mark a little bit for you that actually does matter with the cards? Because we talked about something that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But what does matter to you on the cards, as far as what wasn't really expressed that well when it comes to the cards?
That's a really good question. I don't really think in that way. So this is a new thought for me. So I don't have anything coming to mind in terms of, I did express like the shadow thing already. And so in terms of game design, I believe in kind of integrating, extant rules that you may already have in a way that can give fresh life to older sets of cards. Shadow in particular was why I was thinking about that. What would that mean? And that way you can deepen the connections and raise the value of old cards and interest in the set that you've created. They're dealing with Middle-earth Enterprises, which has its own needs and probably doesn't want to conflate things, which is why don't have planeswalkers in this set. The thought crossed my mind today. I guess I don't really want it. I don't miss them as planeswalkers. I was in the playtest for the first version of this. There's a first iteration of this, and there were planeswalkers. I don't think I can talk about more than that. That's the one NDA I can just say I did the playtest. So
don't get yourself in trouble for our sake.
Right, right. But it's recorded for all time. I would say that I would say, as far as planeswalkers, an argument that was brought up that I saw, and I think from maybe WotC themselves, I could be wrong, was that, well, planeswalkers don't really exist in Middle-earth. And I'm like, well, they don't exist in the Forgotten Realms either, but you have them. Right. And so you've got an old white wizard in the form of Elminster who is a planeswalker. And so, and moreover, you've chosen the term avatar here. I'm just pointing out the different double standard here, which is someone who has gone between worlds literally, like Sauron and Gandalf and all the Istari, the 5 wizards. They literally go between realities, so their spirit realm is where they came from. And they enter into Arda, which is our world, the material world. That feels like a planeswalker to me, and it would make sense.
Sure.
So I don't want that, but I'm like, but you could have it. And if you don't want to deal with it, that's okay too. It doesn't make me mad. I don't know if there's anything I'm expressly missing. Galadriel, you brought her up, is my favorite character, I think, in The Lord of the Rings. I think the way she's written is fantastic. And I kind of wish she had white in her. And in the green, Galadriel, the gift giver, I think, and maybe even the Elven Queen, because she is, about that standard and that classic, like, purity and unity, and quote unquote, white is attached to good. It isn't always, but in the lexicon of what this game offers, I think making her Selesnya, the gift giver especially, would have been probably great. Token generation is what she
I agree.
Life gain. Yeah. And it just feels like, in terms of game, marrying that. So that crossed my mind just most recently when you talked about her. But that's kind of everything, I think.
That's fair. Dana, was there anything that you think might have been a little bit of a miss or something that just wasn't quite right with you that we haven't talked about? We already talked about the ring tempts you mechanic.
Not really. And that's probably in part because I just, the property is so meaningful to me and something I've been waiting for so long that I'm probably extra forgiving of things that don't quite hit. Maybe some of the legendary lands, because I, am always looking for an excuse to not run basics in my decks.
That's true.
And considering how iconic in my brain so many of these places are, maybe some of them are a little bit underwhelming. But again, as someone who plays Magic, I understand why you can't just have, Mirkwood be a Gaia's Cradle. It's so easy to break a fantastically powerful land, and maybe that would be something of that power level would be appropriate, but I don't think that's particularly good for the game. So while it may be a bit of a flavor miss or feel like some of the power levels of them aren't what I would have hoped for, I also completely understand why they don't want to flood the game with a whole bunch of ridiculously powerful lands.
Well, and that to me kind of brings into one of my concerns is the power level for this set seems absolutely through the roof. This seems like what Modern Horizons did to the Modern format. I am maybe a little wary that the more that we see from this set, the more this could be that for Commander. Everything we've seen so far seems very, very powerful. There are commons that just seem outrageous, like Mirkwood Bats. Whenever it's 4 mana, it's 3 and a black for a 2/3 with flying. But whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. We already have a ton of Blood Artist type of effects, and just this is way better for token decks. Not to mention treasures are so easy to make.
Yeah, that card is just that of all cards, right? In a set filled with crazy legendary creatures, that's just one that you're like, oh, that's just busted. And I guess maybe that's the reason they wouldn't want that on a legendary creature, so it's able to sit in the command zone. But that is funny to me, that the card that in so many people's minds is popping out as such a ridiculously strong creature is just some bats.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
What hasn't been shown yet that you hope in terms of lore and Lord of the Rings? We are only, as you said, halfway through. Who and what are you looking for? So
we haven't seen Elrond yet. I'm curious to see that.
Yes, that's a good one.
There's a lot of big name characters that we haven't seen. We've seen a lot of versions of pretty much everyone in the Fellowship. So I would like to see a couple other versions. Boromir only has 1 version so far, and I feel that it's some sort of protector of Gondor type of role, because we already have the mono white version. That's the big thing. I really want to see what Elrond does. Again, I mentioned I really like Galadriel, and I'm happy to hear that's one of your favorite characters. But Galadriel being the most powerful, or at least one of them in Arda, the cards don't really show that to me. So I'm curious if they kind of project that power onto Elrond, who's just a much more recognizable character. I think for the typical fan, that's one big character for me that I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, that's actually Elrond is totally totally forgot. I'm going through a couple of characters, and I know Bjorn features more in The Hobbit, but he would be great to see as a werebear, and then also Shelob.
That's my one I'm waiting for as well, for sure.
Well, and I know that Joey was absolutely tickled by the food token.
I'm looking over at Joey. Joey's here, ladies and gentlemen.
Joey's bicep poking in to mention the food token.
That food token is so cool.
Oh, Shelob's food token, yeah.
Yeah, just a body wrapped up in webs. Joey, I know, loves that token. It is absolutely hilarious, but also flavorfully executed. So yeah, there's a lot of big name characters. Sheila will be one. Dane, I'm glad you mentioned that too. But yeah, there's just so much cool stuff. It's hard to kind of parse through everything. I guess the only thing that really actually bothers me is that humans have blue in their color identity. Like the writers of Rohan are Jeskai colors, when like Rohan is the most Boros country in Arda to ever Boros a Boros, like ever. And like King Theoden is basically Tajik. And so to see them as Jeskai colors, I think that's a little bit of a weird miss. I was saying from the beginning, hopefully the elves in Lord of the Rings are going to be green and blue. Maybe the Easterlings are like the only humans to be blue because they're basically pirates.
Yeah.
Effectively. Yeah. But it's weird seeing especially Rohan have blue in their color identity. But that's like, again, that's nitpicking for the sake of nitpicking. Everything else is just absolutely fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, I concur.
So to the both of you then, I'm not huge on art. It usually doesn't affect me or make a huge impact on my experience. But Arlando, as a cosplayer especially, what do you think of the art here? Because there's a lot of so many cool Easter eggs for fans of Lord of the Rings. Like you have the panorama for Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Yeah.
Has anything caught your eye there? Any spoilers, potential cosplay ideas?
I want to say, Aragorn has crossed my path already, and I don't know if I want to be in the line of fire for that, to be frank. And that's something else. I know we'd kind of closed the book on that one, but that's the very real reality of doing business these days. Dave Raposa's Isengard Destroyed. It's a giant scene of Saruman and other moments from the Battle of Isengard, where you have Ents and the Tower of Isengard and members of the Fellowship and orcs. And it's just such eye popper for me. I love that art.
Yeah, the art as a whole just feels like they went a little bit next level. Not that magic art isn't, generally pretty good, but so much of this stuff feels like they went above and beyond, whether it's some of the panoramic cards or, just everything about it. I am just, the art has been one of the things that has really caught my eye so far in this set. It's for me and what it's evoking and what's making me feel, it's the best art set I've seen in Magic in, maybe ever for me so far. And we're only halfway through it. It's just everything I would have possibly wanted. So I have nothing but great things to say about it. And having seen some of the panoramas here, with, a bunch of cards together at once depicting some scene from the books, absolute home run. I don't know why. No notes. 10 of 10.
Thank you. No notes. So I love the basic lands for the set with the map of Middle Earth. So all the different basic lands have an iconic location. It's so cool to see. I'm buying so many of the. I'm sure my accountant would shudder when I told them how much I have earmarked for this set, but there's so many just cool little things, whether it's the 9 separate arts for the Nazgul, that is such a cool homage to the characters there.
I just remembered something that I did want for the set. 2 things.
Okay.
I mentioned the Battle of Isengard and the art that Dave Raposa did. Isengard Destroyed, I think. And the card Saruman of Many Colors is figured in that large panorama of art. But Saruman of Many Colors is only 3 colors. And I kind of wanted him to have red. He's Esper at the moment. And so it feels like a few colors. Saruman of a few colors.
So, well, it's not all colors. It's many colors. And
right, exactly.
60%.
Right. So, but I think many is on the more side, and particularly the lore of Saruman at the end of, towards, when he's been completely corrupted, he's very red.
He's very Grixis colors.
Yeah, it's super, and so I think that felt like a miss. The other thing I wanted, was in terms of, well, we haven't discussed the rarity of the one ring that exists.
The one of one of one
the
ring.
One of one. But I wanted, and this is again me just pie in the sky stuff, so I know I can't get always what I want. But I wanted 3 of 3 for the Elven, 7 of 7 for the Dwarves, and a 9 of 9 for the men. That would, and then in addition to what they did, with the number, I think, but having like even this other group that reflects that would just turn this into like mania.
Well,
like, and can you imagine?
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dana, you might have said something about it before, but they do have the Elven, the Dwarven, and the human rings. They do have a version of Soul Ring that are, I think there's 3,000, 7,000, and 9,000. So I guess that is cool, but I agree. Having the one of one and then the 3 of 3 and just to complete that whole set.
Oh my gosh.
But you know that you have so many collectors out there that would be turning over absolutely just furious.
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say that they did do it. I'm going to create this reality now in my mind as a wizard. And I'm going to say it's just this secret thing that's just going to come out. Like what they do with Zendikar, the first one, they had mythic treasures or whatever they had. And it's the same thing where they're just going to have these 3 of 3s, 7 of 7s unannounced. No, but I wish.
Yeah. Well, and then I guess the last thing that I want to shout out that is really cool to see is the box toppers. There's more ancient tombs, so Dana can lose life to make mana. They're just checking so many boxes with, okay, well now also we have these amazing reprints also that are sparked into or skinned, I should say, into the Lord of the Rings universe. And that's just, they didn't have to do that, but they're just hitting another box that I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, the party tree is one that I'm most excited about. I think a reprint of the Great Henge is an awesome idea. That card is expensive and it's very powerful. So I think it's a really great idea to have that one as a box topper.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I keep pointing out the flavor and the lore wins that they have, but all of the reprints, they fit with the card that they're redoing. Whether it's Isengard, Saruman's Fortress, is a redo of Besiju, who shelters all, which makes sure that you can have spells that aren't going to be countered by paying a couple life. Or you have Elisar the Elfstone, which is a reskinned Cloudstone Curio, which that's a card that got really expensive without really anybody noticing. I know in my head, it's like, oh, it's a $10, $15 card. No, it's like $40. So I'm very happy to see that. But also Ancient Tomb is very, very expensive. I know Dana will never let me not know that. But also, since Joey's not here to tell me, no, I can't talk about it, Barrow Downs is a reskinned Bojuka Bog, so you can still exile graveyards, even in Lord of the Rings worlds.
Yes, his reaction is gold. I'm just going to say that.
When I first saw that too, I didn't see that it was a reskin. I'm like, they gave me a second Bojuka Bog? Joey's going to be so mad. They're like, oh, it's just the same one. No, I can't run two.
Yeah, there's so much awesome stuff going on. It's just absolutely a home run. And honestly, I'm glad, Arlando, that you got to come on the show, because just getting to nerd out for a little bit about this set that we haven't even gotten to play with it yet, and we're already so excited for it. It's just, it's super cool. So I guess before we sign off, is there any last thoughts about the set, about what you're hoping to see, anything like that before we go?
Last thoughts about the set and what I'm hoping to see. I have been so pleased with the art and the choices and the bravery. And, you got to get into the most sacrosanct of lore and IPs ever. The Lord of the Rings is like, you better do it right, guys. And I think they're doing a fine job. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say. Things that I want to see. I just want to see more. Just want to see more.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Dana, anything?
I want to see the set do so well that we get to revisit it in like a Silmarillion set, so I can get a Huan the Hound card, which is one of my favorite characters from the Silmarillion, and I want to see that as a commander I could run. So Baron and Luthien, there's just so much stuff in the Silmarillion I would love to see as well. So yeah, I just want this set to continue to be an absolute bomb, so we can get more of them in the future.
Yeah, I'm behind both of those ideas. I also want to shout out the debut video when they had Elijah Wood come out and they showed him the One Ring and he was like, "Oh no, I gave it back." And then they had the nice little Ian Holm just, "Oh no, it's here in my pocket." That moment was just so heartwarming. It just it was just fantastic. I've just been so impressed with everything. So I know I've said this so many times. This set is amazing. Small nitpicks here and there, but yes, I'm glad to see it. So I guess with that then, Arlando, thank you so much for coming on, for nerding out with us, for getting a chance just to hang out and talk. One more time before we go, where can everybody find you on social media? Just plug whatever you want to plug so people can support your work.
For sure. I'm primarily on Twitter these days at Teferi Magic. Instagram is Teferi MTG, and my sadly neglected Facebook is Teferi Timebender. They normally have my glowing eyes face, so it's pretty easy to spot. Thanks so much for having me on. This is literally like just a dream. Talking about Lord of the Rings and magic. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's awesome to have you on. Dana, where can everybody find you real quick?
You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC and Commander's Herald, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And I'm Matt Morgan. You can find me on Twitter at Mathemus55. Don't forget, we are streaming over at twitch.tv/EDHRECast. Shout outs to Chase, also known as Mana Curves. You can find them on Twitter as well for doing editing, helping out Joey, who you can find on Twitter at Joseph M. Schultz. So thank you, everyone, once again. Let us know in the comments what your favorite cards are. Like I said, we're only halfway through at the time of recording, so there's going to be lots more cards below. So let us know in the comments what you are most excited about. But thank you, everyone, and we will see you all next time.